On today's show, how Donovan Mitchell and the Cleveland Cavaliers survived Game 7 against the Orlando Magic, why the Cavs offense feels a little clunky here this postseason, and what are the Cavs' chances against the Celtics in the second round. It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Moms are a gift, right? So give her the best this Mother's Day. Get gifts that are as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. Select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech to different self-care essentials and so much more delivered right to her doorstep. Look, you might have some really big plans to take her out for a nice Mother's Day lunch or a fancy dinner, and that's incredible, right? But what better way to surprise mom than to have a gift waiting for her on her doorstep the moment she wakes up on her special day? Or it could be a special day for a number of moms in your life, right? Use DoorDash to make sure that they all know that you're thinking about them. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place. Get 50% off of your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order. Now with promo code LOCKEDONNBA using DoorDash. Again, that's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Cavs, Evan Dammarell, who you can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts, and on YouTube, just search Locked On Cavs. And Evan, the Cavs surviving Game 7 against the Orlando Magic, moving on to the second round to face the Boston Celtics. Final score here in the Game 7, 106-94. And man, I'll tell you what, the way this game started, it didn't look like Cleveland was going to be advancing to the second round here because it was all Magic. It felt like through about the first, maybe about 24 minutes of this game, led by as many as 18, took a 10-point lead in a halftime. And then that third quarter happened where Donovan Mitchell woke up and Max Strus as well helped out in a big way in that third quarter to regain control of this game.
Yeah, it was a really weird game because my co-host and I were giving our thoughts after Game 6 where Cleveland had a 5-point lead, I believe, with about 5-ish minutes to go, and then they blew it and, forced this Game 7 scenario. And we both said, Orlando smells blood in the water and they have nothing to lose. Like, this could be a little bit tough, especially because it's an early matinee game. There's a lot of things going against the Cavs, and it didn't really give me much reason to be optimistic in the first half. And then, as you had noted, the 10-point lead Orlando was carrying was slowly chipped away at by Donovan Mitchell. I think he did lead by example in this game. That's a great shout. And it kind of had a trickle-down effect on everybody else. I think you saw it from Max Strus, as you had noted, Darius Garland as well. I think Caris LeVert, really coming out of his shell quite a bit just after being pretty unremarkable for the first 6 games of this series. And then also just like Isaac Okoro playing very well too, like hustled. And one of the bigger shots of the game came on. He grabs an offensive rebound off of a Darius Garland miss, who then passes it to Donovan Mitchell, who then kicks it right back to Garland, who makes that 3-pointer with confidence and conviction. And I think if you're the Cavs, for a team that has just struggled and been so up and down all season, like getting a win like this, yeah, it gives you a sigh of relief. You don't get to celebrate long because Boston is literally on Tuesday. And so you have to kind of shift your focus to that, but they do have some confidence on their side because they were down 18 and it seemed like they were just kind of laying down and giving like Cancun on 3 all throughout the first half. And after that, like they showed a little bit of fight. They showed a little poise. And my co-host and I talked about this after our initial thoughts after Game 7. But this is something the Cavs didn't have last year when they just got pummeled by the Knicks. And I think it's just really refreshing to see them kind of not quit, as cliches or like simple as that may sound.
Yeah, this was that moment between Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, right? After a game where Garland struggled for so much of this game, to see him knock down that shot and then have Donovan Mitchell come over and kind of try to hype him up and be locked in with him, like that's what you need from your vets, right? For the young guys on this roster. Now, looking at this game and kind of looking at the series as a whole, though, I wonder how much of look, the Cavs regular season, they were about a middle of the pack offensive team, right? 15th, 16th, somewhere around there. In the playoffs, though, they've been second to last in offensive rating throughout the playoffs. The only team worse than them in the playoffs were the Pelicans, and they were ousted in the first round, swept completely. So how much of that though is going against a top tier Magic defense versus concerns with, the Cavaliers offensive, just output so far in the postseason?
So I think their offensive performance starts and ends with how healthy this team. And sure, it doesn't help that Orlando was such a good team defensively. I think you saw it right away in game one, even if though Cleveland kept Orlando arm's length away in the first two games, they go back to Orlando and the Magic are feeling themselves back home. But like it was consistent in the fact that this is only the second time the Cavs have cracked triple digits in this series, and both of them resulted in wins. But like it kind of gives you an idea of one, this team is struggling offensively because of injuries, which I'll touch on in a second, but the Magic have a lot of size. Like they were constantly double, almost triple teaming Donovan Mitchell between Jalen Suggs and Gary Harris. And then even Franz Wagner got in on the action too. And then like Darius Garland was getting double teams and they were constantly sticking a body on Max Strus. And I think Evan Mobley kind of struggled at times against either of the Wagner brothers, whether it's because of their spacing or just their overall length and maybe just on court chemistry they have together. And then it's just tough because Jared Allen, to open this series, was by and far the best player, but he gets elbowed in the ribs by one of the Wagner brothers early on. And then it gets aggravated in Orlando, and he's missed the last three games of this series. And that's a big blow to them. But that's just kind of been a consistent theme for this Cavs team all season long is how healthy are they? And outside of the Allen stuff, like it's fair to speculate if he'll be available against Boston for game one or even game two. But Donovan Mitchell's not 100%. Like, I'm sure folks can see it. Like, there's moments where maybe he's grimacing or looks like he's playing through something. He had a pretty gnarly knee injury and he got PRP injections like Kobe did just to kind of bring him back sooner. And it's been a mixed bag since he's gotten back. And he claims he's 100% mentally and physically, but you can tell, like, he's picking and choosing stuff. And it is something he admitted, like, he is trying his darndest to figure out what the limits are of this injury, what his pain threshold and tolerance is, and then to maximize every opportunity. And sure, you're not going to get efficient numbers, especially when Orlando makes you work for every shot. But Mitchell had just enough in the tank to get the Cavs out of the first round, and thankfully they're not content with it. But we'll see how it goes against Boston, of course. But obviously against this Magic team, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like Orlando was a tough draw for them, just no matter what, just how good the Magic are defensively. But like with how the Cavs have struggled to stay consistent and healthy has really kind of taken the wind out of their sails a lot of the time at offense.
I do wonder too, is, as somebody who follows the Cavaliers so closely, right, and is, paying much closer attention to this team than I have been able to throughout the season, though, is Evan Mobley doing enough offensively? Obviously he's a big part of what they do defensively. Obviously losing Allen kind of changes the complexion of things a little bit as well on that side of the ball, maybe him taking on even a little bit more responsibility over there. But that's the one area for me in Evan Mobley's kind of growth as a player that I've been a little disappointed in, right, is just not seeing him really he hasn't attempted a three since game 3 in this series.
Yeah, and I think it's understandable. Maybe disappointed is a good way to put it. I think injuries, of course, like Mobley having knee surgery in the middle of the season did kind of throw a wrench in things, but it's always just been like those little teases. And even like the 3-pointer in game 3 was a tease where you thought maybe, okay, is this going to be part of his arsenal come playoff time? And in the first 3 games, you saw him at least taking them because Orlando was either leaving him open or the Cavs worked their offense to get him some clean looks out there. But that's always kind of been the existing issue with Mobley's growth and development, especially when he does have to share the floor with Jared Allen. Like I know there's a lot of too big truthers when it comes to the Cavs and how they play, but it is a fair thing to question. Like, okay, if Evan Mobley doesn't become like a guy who reliably takes 3 to 4 3-pointers and then or at least keeps defenses honest and reactive when he flares out to the perimeter, is he better suited as a 5? And I think this series against the Magic, when he took over from games 5 through 7, you saw that maybe physically he can handle that toll, but not 100% of the time. And you could tell like he was running on fumes at some points. And like, it was more so like his attention and focus was on the defensive side of the ball. I think it can't be under, like, sure, they get pummeled in game 6 in the closing moments, but he did have 10 blocks over the last 2 games in the series. And I think he rewired his focus on defense. And I think more so the hope, at least for Cleveland, was Garland, Mitchell, Strus, etc., would step up and kind of take advantage of all the constant pressure at the rim, and maybe like they start hitting on the perimeter and Mobley takes advantage of that. But Orlando's also just kind of a funky matchup too. But Mobley's just physically speaking, not naturally built to be a center right now, but it's kind of also tough to put a pin in where is he at development wise, just because, yeah, it's been kind of an up and down, pretty bleh third season for him.
To go through a grueling 7-game series against a tough Magic opponent, and then to be rewarded by immediately having to turn around and deal with the Celtics, who, albeit are not at full strength right now with Kristaps Porzingis still out. Obviously, Cavs will be without Jarrett Allen, at least probably for the first couple games of the series, maybe. TBD on that. But what's your prediction going into this series? Give me your feeling on Cavs Celtics going into this series.
Well, if Jarrett Allen is available, and I think maybe Dean Wade is available as well, we'll see. Wade was shut down for the entire first round and doesn't seem to be doing much work from when I last saw him in terms of just engagement, but he is kind of an X factor against Boston. But the lack of Porzingis does change the trajectory of how you maybe have to deal with Boston's spacing, but it's going to be tough. I think the optimist in me wants to say that the Celtics win this in 5 or 6 games. I think the Cavs can really maybe test and hit the pressure points on the Celtics because historically speaking, they have played well against them when Porzingis wasn't on the floor, but also Drew Holiday wasn't on the floor either. And I just think, that pairing of Holiday and Brown to just match Garland and Mitchell 1-for-1 with, just on a pure defensive standpoint, like that's really tough. And I'm curious to see how creative JB Bickerstaff and his coaching staff can get on offense just to kind of get Mitchell and Garland some cleaner looks and maybe so allow the Cavs to play with some pace and space, just because, I mean, people will say they tanked that game against the Hornets. I don't think we'll ever get an honest answer on whether they did or not. And that's what it had them draw the Magic in the first round. But if that was your intent and you want to go swing with the big dogs and prove you belong in the Eastern Conference, there's no better litmus test than the Celtics. It's just, do the Cavs have enough gumption to do it? I that's completely fair to question. I haven't fully processed it quite yet, just because I'm kind of impressed with how they played in Game 7. But at least, like I said at the top, they have a little bit of like that identity or semblance of who they can be, and they can keep building upon that and maybe just slowly building momentum. So let's not say they take Game 1, but they could possibly take Game 2 and ride a little bit more momentum heading back to Cleveland for Games 3 and 4.
How will the Cavs ultimately match up with the Celtics? Could we see a second round upset? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Cavs. Evan,
Sure
thanks
am.
for stopping by Locked On NBA with me, man.
Absolutely.